Hey everyone, and welcome back to Bronco Wild Outdoors. Today is a little bit different on the video scale because we're talking manufacturing and, in particular, JIT or just in time manufacturing. And is it time for that to go? Um, the reason why this is relevant is if you're like over the 120,000 people been waiting on a Bronco, and some of us have received them and a lot hasn't, then you understand that there's obviously been some issues. Some has been labor issues, but most of the issues have basically been commodities or inventory. And so today I'm just going to do a short video just to kind of break it down and to let you know where we are in manufacturing. And as a consumer, I'm not in the manufacturing business. As a consumer, this is my opinion looking from the outside in. Now, obviously, that's easy for me to do because I'm not having the right to checks and make those big decisions. This is my opinion. I do work for myself. I own several businesses, and we do have inventory in one of those businesses, so I get it. So if you're in the fresh food, produce, restaurant business, there's only so much inventory that you can have because things spoil, right? Short shelf life, so to speak, unless it's chemically altered, and then who knows what. But basically, that is short term. Fashion is 6 month or maybe a year. Things that are in today are out in 6 months or maybe less time now. So in fashion, you'll see that if you Google about inventory, you'll see that companies will advisors or whoever will say, "Hey, short inventory, don't keep a lot. It's going to be a liability for you." Um, but when you're looking at something like cars or vehicles, manufacturing of big items, washers, dryers, HVAC, the the shelf life is a little bit longer. Okay, for example, if Ford has 125,000 reservations or orders, 190,000 reservations, 125,000 active orders, or maybe more, maybe a little less, and they have an option of ordering more material, more commodities or inventory, then the way that just in time worked was from the point of the components being manufactured by the supplier to being delivered to put on the Bronco, it's a very short window. So if anything in that cycle breaks, something breaks down, whether it be raw material, weather that prevents things from being manufactured, a natural disaster, or whatever, then it's quick to mess up the manufacturing. So, my idea is that instead of just in time, there's also a term called JIC or just in case, where companies are actively as they can get commodities now. Because remember, some things are freeing up, some things are still tight. But going forward, whenever they have the opportunity, are they going to start shelving a lot of components? Now, big items are hard to house because of warehousing space and staffing, insurance, the labor to manage that, and then also transport. Internally, then the supplier's not transporting it; it's the manufacturer transporting it from a holding lot, a warehouse somewhere to get it to manufacturing. Because look, if you look at some of these manufacturing facilities, there's not a lot of laydown area for raw material or components. And it wouldn't be raw material at that point. It would be finished components ready to bolt onto that vehicle running down the line. And quite frankly, there's just not a lot of room. So I get it is limited right now based on current day manufacturing, how much inventory can be held. But if I were running the show, I would really try to stretch it out to a 6 month supply. Because then what happens is if we have another chaos event that, whatever that's happened in the last 2 years, then if you're truly keeping about a 50-day supply of vehicles, which is where generally manufacturers want to be versus the 75 that it has been, if you're keeping a 50-day supply and then you have 6 month worth of inventory to build these vehicles, then you have time to recalculate. You have time to take whatever situation that's going on in the world and sort of help to I guess find an alternative to your manufacturing so that the downtime is not as great as it has been. But then the other thing is, okay, you can't keep everything, but what could you keep? If you look at some of the pictures of these manufacturers had thousands and thousands of vehicles built and waiting on chips, the semiconductor issue, that's a lot of labor. That's a lot of capital just sitting there waiting on a relatively, in that scale, inexpensive item, but an item that you can't live without. Um, and of course, all the more features that you have, the more complicated, the more semiconductors are in these chips. So, maybe harder to get, harder to manufacture, takes longer to get, or whatever. So, manufacturers started scaling back on some of the options that they were able to produce. So, the idea that you would shelve more semiconductors or chips would be, when you can get them now, have that opportunity to grow that inventory. So at relatively small warehousing, something like that's a lot easier. So I think it's time that, Henry Ford helped to invent, he had the first version of just in time. He had someone working with him at his Fordson tractor company. They got rid of a lot of inventory, became lean and mean, then turned that same process over into the company in 1920 to the automotive side and did the exact same thing. And then in 1950s, a gentleman that worked for Toyota came over to the United States and saw how the produce was put out in a grocery store, and he was amazed that, as things would be used, some more would be brought in from the back, from the heavy refrigerated section. That helps keeps it help kept it keep it fresher longer. And then behind the scenes, you had trucks bringing in stuff to the back of the store. So you had the back of the house being restocked, and then you had the product being brought out. And so that idea was, wow, okay, well, how about the manufacturer hold that inventory, or make it a little bit later, and then get it to the manufacturing, so there's low capital being spent. The dollars are spent or kept in the business to grow, make payroll, expand, and not sitting there in inventory. So it was a great concept. The problem is that, we're this global economy now. If something happens, a natural disaster or a war or whatever happens in a certain part of the world, then it can affect absolutely the rest of us. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to be brought back um, to America, and that's being done with the chips right now. And I think companies like Ford, from what I'm reading, they're really looking at changing and modifying so that there's more bumper stock, or there's shelving of components that can be housed to help limit the risk of manufacturing and downtime. So this just in time is some being altered to just in case, which is basically building inventory. I read something on a website, the Ford Authority. It's a great website, by the way. If you have a chance, check it out. But they had an article of how Ford going forward, and all manufacturers, but this one was about Ford, how it's going to look a little bit different as far as dealer inventory. So manufacturers building these cars, filling lots up to a 75 days supply. Now that is being looked at as they want to get back to a 50-day supply, give or take. And now, if you have the means to manufacture 6 months, if something happens in some part of the world, you're really cushioning yourself, or at least the business and the economy, from the immediate knee-jerk reaction of suddenly inventory is already tight and now it's non-existent, or a lot less. So I just think that as companies start to adapt to a new way of doing business. You were told a few years ago that everyone, or a lot of people, had to go to an office. You had to sit in the desk or the office, the cubicle, and you had to do this job. And there's a lot of jobs we found over the last 2 years can be done at a residence, or at your house remotely. You can do it from some jobs from a hotel or on a beach in Florida. So things have changed a lot, and I think that change is not just in employment, but it's also into the manufacturing. So if you've ordered your Bronco and your dates are getting pushed back, just think that behind the scenes, it's not somebody just doesn't want to build your Bronco. There's something in that supply chain that is affecting it, and they're working hard to work through that. All manufacturers are doing it, and I think all manufacturers are doing a great job at overcoming the stuff. I mean, in our business, we've experienced it as well, but we are just a tiny little operation compared to, these big automotive companies. And between the labor, the manufacturing, the components, the inventory in general, they're doing a remarkable job. So hang in there. If you haven't gotten your Bronco, or your Mach-E or your Lightning or whatever GM or Chrysler vehicle that you've ordered. Maybe you're watching this channel just for whatever, but honestly, most people watching this is either Bronco or Ford fans, and it's pretty amazing. So I want to show you one thing here, and then we're going to wrap this up today. Let's add Let's add this to the stream here. So this is something that I received. I got it online from Ford. Basically, this is November 2021 sales. Now I'm going to enlarge it on my end so I can see it a little bit better, but it doesn't change there. All right, so this is November 2021 sales report. So you can see all the different vehicles there. If we look down here in the highlighted area, it says combined Ford's newest must-have vehicles, including the Mustang Mach-E, Bronco, Bronco Sport, and Maverick, have the fastest turn rates on dealer lots. Now, from what I know about it, I think the fastest turn rate would obviously be because most of the, not all, but most of the vehicles are ordered. So when they come in, the dealer's calling you saying, hey, your ride's here. They're doing the PDI. You go down, you do the paperwork, you drive it home. So yes, certainly it's going to be a lot less sitting on the lot there. Timing. Now, this is important here. So the top line here on the left-hand side, Bronco Sport. So in November, Ford built 11,486 Bronco Sports. And if you look up the column that says November 2021, look at November 2020. It says 22. I guess that's accurate. Wow, that's pretty crazy. Now, for the year, so this is from November of last year, November of this year, 21, it looks like it's 101,891 Bronco Sports. That's amazing. And, whether the person buying, the buyer for the Bronco Sport is not necessarily the buyer for the midsize Bronco, or you typically call it the full size between the two, but it is a midsize SUV. It's built on the Ranger frame. But if we come over here to Bronco, look at the second highlighted area. For the month of November, 8287. So 8,287 Broncos were built in November of 21. And that brings the year total to 25,855. Now, keep in mind that that's first year, that's a half a year, and that's also dealing with the top issues in commodities. And so as commodities start to free up, raw material frees up, manufacturing starts to get more closer to where we need it to be. I think it's possible 60,000 should be easy to meet in 22 and possibly higher. I mean, that number could go higher, and that's barring anything that happens that is not known, right? So you have your known knowns and you have your known unknowns, right? We don't really know what the unknowns are, but things could happen, right? Something could happen in the economy, and there could be a natural disaster or whatever. So if you look at this is pretty impressive as far as, well, the Bronco Sport is a huge seller for Ford. And if you don't like one, then don't buy it. But maybe you want the bigger Bronco, or maybe you don't want a big Bronco and you want the Bronco Sport. This is a great thing about how it's done. Ford took one brand and making it a sub brand, and they're appealing to two different type buyers. Maybe even three different type buyers, but definitely you have the sport buyer and you have the Bronco buyer, the full size or mid-size SUV. So anyway, this is something I wanted to bring up on the screen here because, I think it's important if you look at how things are changing in manufacturing, and it's changing right before your eyes. So keep in mind that if you're still waiting for your Bronco, just hang in there because things are changing literally weekly, and they're doing a remarkable job. Sure, there's some pricing things out there that if anyone looks at, hindsight's 2020, they could do different. But I know for a fact as a business owner that we've had to deal with some real chaos, and I can't totally discount that and say, yeah, but I want my Bronco now, and not, consider that, right? I know what we go through as a business, so I know exactly what they're going through. So I just thought I'd talk about the just in time manufacturing. I think it's time that just in time gets modified. Inventory is an asset to a business. Some people internally look at it as a liability because cash spent to hold that inventory is out of the business, right? And if you look at expansion, if you look at building new plants, or if you're a smaller store and you want to open new stores and things like that, yes, holding that inventory and having to pay for it upfront is taking away from those expansions. So overall, there is a balance between inventory and expansion and running your day-to-day business. However, without inventory, you have no business. So that critical balance, when you do a Google review of should I have inventory or not, the general broad brush is you shouldn't have any or hardly any. I mean, you should have enough to be in business today or maybe tomorrow. That's, to me, that is like, okay, the bigger question is what type of business do you have? Sure, if you're in a food business, if you're in some unusual specialty market, maybe that limit the inventory is short. But if you're in manufacturing of HVAC or water heaters, washers and dryers, furniture, that inventory can be out there a lot longer. And then in manufacturing of vehicles, components, obviously, especially if you have 125,000 orders that you're trying to meet, now maybe a little bit less, obviously, but that there is a reason to house that. And so, getting that vehicle out, the faster it gets out, the faster you cash in, you bring in those profits to the company and you do it all over again. So anyway, manufacturing is changing a little bit. I just want to do this video here on Bronco Wild Outdoors about the business side of things and just in time manufacturing. And in my humble opinion, I've never understood it quite maybe the way that some people that are in the industry know it. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have it so tight so that if something's like a train, if one car derails, it affects the rest of them. So I like having a little bit more cushion in business, but it's also in the nature of the business that you're in. So, hey, I hope you enjoyed this video today. Just a little bit different look on some of the business side of things. And hey, if you've ordered a Bronco and you're waiting on it, it's on the way. Hope you get it soon and enjoy. I will talk to you soon. And hey, check us out every Sunday night at 8 p.m. for our live stream right here at Bronco Wild Outdoors. Talk to you soon. See ya.